Chapter 1. The Call. The phone rang once. I almost didn't answer it. It was early, too early for anything good, too late for anything routine. The kind of hour where silence feels intentional. I was standing in the kitchen, coffee untouched, staring out the window at a yard that needed mowing. Normal things. Civilian things. I trained myself to live inside them. The phone rang again. Brooke's name lit up the screen. I answered. Mason. Her voice broke before it found shape. There was screaming in the background. Not adult screaming. Hi. Finn. Animal. Mason, please slow down, I said. My voice came out even, almost calm. I noticed that before I noticed anything else. Brooke, breathe. Where are you? The hospital. Oh, God, Tessa, she sobbed, words tangling. Her legs. Mason, her legs are gone. Gone. The word didn't land the way it should have. It slid off something hard inside me and disappeared. Gone how? I asked. She won't stop screaming. They're twisted. There's blood everywhere. I don't know what happened. Dominic was watching her, and then Brooke, I said firmer now. Listen to me. Is she alive? A pause. A hitch of breath. Yes, she's alive. But Mason, I'm on my way. I hung up before she could finish. Not because I didn't care. Because I cared too much to let my voice change. For 3 seconds, I stood there with the phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the wall. Then I set it down carefully on the counter. Not tossed. Not dropped. Carefully. Training doesn't erase fear. It files it down. Puts it where it belongs. I moved. Keys. Wallet. Jacket. My hands didn't shake. I noticed that too. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a smaller voice was already screaming, but it was sealed behind steel doors. I'd built those doors a long time ago. As I stepped outside, the morning air hit my face, cool, damp, smelling like wet grass. Normal. Wrongly normal. Birds were making noise. A neighbor's garage door was opening down the street. The world hadn't noticed anything had changed. I got into the truck and started the engine. Only then did the word come back. Gone. I backed out of the driveway and pulled onto the road, tires humming over asphalt. I didn't speed. Speed makes mistakes. I drove like I was heading to work. Every movement measured. Every turn deliberate. The phone rang again. I didn't answer. I already had what I needed. Location. Emergency. My daughter. Everything else could wait. At the first stoplight, my foot hovered over the brake. Red. I stopped. A man in the car, next to me, sipped from a travel mug, glanced over, nodded politely. I nodded back. My reflection stared at me from the glass. Gray at the temples now. Lines around the eyes. Retired. Domestic. A man who fixed fences and complained about property taxes. Not the man who cataloged exits the moment he entered a room. The light turned green. I drove. My mind did what it always did under pressure. It organized. It sorted facts from noise. Brooke's voice had been hysterical, but the words mattered. Legs twisted. Blood. Screaming. Dominic watching her. Dominic. The name didn't bring anger. It brought something colder. Assessment. He'd always been loud. Always too close when he talked. Always quick to laugh at the wrong moments. I'd clocked it years ago and filed it away under potential problem, the way you know to lose stare without tripping on it yet. But children don't just lose their legs. They don't just twist. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, then consciously loosened it. White knuckles don't help. Another call came in. Then another. I let them go. Brooke needed someone steady when I arrived, not a man who had already burned himself out on the drive. The hospital came into view low, wide, all glass and concrete. Ambulance, bay, lit up like a stage. I pulled into the lot and parked between 2 sedans. I sat there for a moment after killing the engine, listening to it tick as it cooled. That was when the fear tried again. It crept in sideways, wearing my daughter's face. Tessa with her crooked front tooth, the one she'd refused to let the dentist fix. Tessa running barefoot through the sprinkler last summer, shrieking every time the cold water hit her legs. Her legs. I shut my eyes and breathed once. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Slow. Fear acknowledged. Not indulged. I opened the door. Inside, the hospital smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Voices echoed off tile. A nurse hurried past pushing a gurney. Somewhere, A monitor beeped steadily, indifferent to everything it measured. I walked toward the front desk, scanning without meaning to. Security camera in the corner. Exit signs. Hallways branching like arteries. Brooke was easy to spot. She was standing near the entrance to the trauma wing, hair wild, shirt stained dark down the front. Blood, not hers. She was talking to a woman in scrubs, hands fluttering uselessly, her whole body vibrating with panic. She saw me. Her face collapsed. Mason! She crossed the distance between us in a stumble and slammed into my chest, fists gripping my jacket like she might fall through the floor if she let go. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I should have been there. Hey, I said, steadying her. Hey, you're here. I'm here. Her sobs shook against me. I held her because that was what she needed right then, even as my eyes moved past her shoulder, taking in the double doors behind her. Red letters. Authorized personnel only. That's where Tessa was. That's where whatever happened had happened after. Brooke pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes red and swollen. They won't tell me anything yet. They just took her. She was screaming my name. Mason, she was screaming, I know. I said, though I didn't. Not really. I know. She clutched my arm. They said something about fractures. I don't understand. Dominic said she fell. He said, my gaze sharpened. Dominic is here? I asked. She nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. He drove us. He said it was an accident. He said kids are clumsy. The words settled into place with a quiet, awful click. I looked again at the doors, at the nurses moving with purpose, at the security guard standing too casually by the wall. Something was wrong. Not just that my daughter was hurt, not just that my wife was breaking in my arms. Something underneath, it all didn't line up. The kind of wrong you feel before you can name it. The kind that gets people killed when they ignore it. I squeezed Brooke's hand once. Grounding. Reassuring. Stay here, I told her. I'm going to check in. As I took my first step toward the desk, toward the hallway, toward whatever waited on the other side of those doors, a single cold certainty settled in my chest. This wasn't an accident. And as I walked into the hospital, I already knew that nothing about this day was going to be ordinary again. Chapter 2. 9 Fractures. The doors to the ICU opened with a muted hiss, and the sound hit me before the sight. Tessa was screaming. Not crying. Screaming. A raw, tearing sound that didn't belong in a child's body. It echoed off the walls, bounced off stainless steel and glass, crawled under my skin, and stayed there. I stepped inside. She was on a narrow bed that looked too big for her, swallowed by white sheets and machines. Her hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat. Her face was red, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open wide as if the sound was being pulled out of her against her will. "Daddy!" she screamed when she saw me. "Daddy, it hurts." I crossed the room in 3 steps. "I'm here," I said, and my voice did something strange, steady on the surface, tight underneath like steel cable. I took her hand. It was slick with sweat, fingers clenching around mine with desperate strength. "I'm right here, Tessa. Look at me." Her eyes flicked open, wild and glassy. "My legs," she sobbed. "Daddy, my legs won't work." I followed her gaze down without meaning to. Both of her legs were wrapped in temporary splints and padded supports, immobilized from hip to ankle. The angle was wrong. Even to an untrained eye, something was wrong. Too stiff, too deliberate. I didn't touch them. A nurse moved quickly at the foot of the bed, adjusting a monitor. Another stood on the other side, murmuring reassurances that Tessa couldn't hear over her own pain. "It hurts," Tessa cried again, louder. "Please make it stop." "I know," I said. "I know. They're helping you. You're safe." The word tasted like a lie, but I said it anyway. A doctor approached from the far side of the room. Mid-40s, dark circles under his eyes. His badge read Dr. Patel. He watched Tessa for a moment, then looked at me, not with surprise, not with pity, but with something heavier. "Are you her father?" he asked. "Yes. We're going to give her something stronger for the pain," he said. "It may make her sleepy." "Do it," I said. No hesitation. He nodded to the nurse, who moved immediately. A syringe. A port. Smooth, practiced motions. Tessa's screams didn't stop right away. They broke into sobs first, then shuddering breaths. Her grip on my hand loosened, then tightened again, reflexively. "Don't leave," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Her eyelids fluttered. The tension drained out of her body in small increments, like air leaking from a punctured tire. The room grew quieter. Machines took over the noise, steady beeps, soft hums. When she finally slept, her face slack with exhaustion, I realized my jaw hurt. I hadn't unclenched it since I walked in. Dr. Patel gestured toward the door. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" I nodded once, careful not to wake Tessa as I let go of her hand. My fingers felt numb when I straightened. Outside the room, the ICU corridor was bright and cold. Too clean, too controlled. Brooke stood a few feet away, arms wrapped around herself, eyes fixed on the floor. She looked up when she saw me, searching my face. "She's asleep," I said quietly. Brooke exhaled a shaky breath and nodded, tears spilling over again. "Is she?" "She's alive." That was all I could give her. Dr. Patel waited until Brooke stepped closer, then lowered his voice. He didn't look at her. He looked at me. "We've completed the initial imaging," he said. "Tell me," I replied. He glanced back toward the room, then leaned in slightly, like he didn't want the walls to hear him. "There are 9 fractures," he said. The number landed cleanly. 9. He nodded. "Both legs. Femur, tibia, fibula. Multiple locations. Some are fresh. Some may not be." Brooke gasped beside me. I felt it in my peripheral vision, but I didn't look at her. My eyes stayed on his. "Accident?" I asked. Dr. Patel didn't answer right away. He chose his words the way men do when they know those words will change everything. "No," he said quietly. "These are spiral fractures." I waited. "That type of fracture is caused by twisting," he continued. "Significant rotational force. You don't see this from falls. Not from playground accidents. Not even from car collisions, unless someone did it," I said. "Yes." Brooke made a sound that wasn't a word. She covered her mouth with both hands, shaking her head over and over like she could erase what she'd just heard. Dr. Patel's voice dropped even lower. "Someone applied force to your daughter's legs and twisted until the bones failed." There it was. Not speculation. Not suspicion. Fact. I felt something move inside my chest. Not explode. Not crack. Shift. Like a door opening that had been welded shut for years. "How long?" I asked. "It's hard to say exactly," he replied. "But the pattern suggests deliberate action, sustained pressure." This wasn't a moment. It was a process. Brooke sobbed openly now. "Oh God. Oh God. Oh God." I put a hand on her shoulder. It was automatic. Muscle memory. Anchor the shaking thing before it falls apart. "Will she walk?" I asked. Dr. Patel hesitated. "We're doing everything we can. Surgery will be necessary. Recovery will be long. Painful. She's young, which helps. But I won't lie to you, this is serious trauma." Trauma. Another clean word. "Is she safe now?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "She's stable." And he paused. "We've notified hospital security and local law enforcement. By protocol, injuries of this nature must be reported." "Good." Brooke stiffened. "The police?" "Yes," Dr. Patel said gently. "They'll want to ask some questions." I nodded once. "They should." He studied my face for a beat, then nodded back. "I'll check on her again shortly." When he left, the hallway felt louder somehow. Brooke sagged against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, Mason, I didn't know." "I know," I said. "I'm in it." I looked through the glass into Tessa's room. She lay still now, chest rising and falling, small and fragile under too many blankets. Tubes and wires traced her outline like a diagram. 9 fractures, spiral breaks, deliberate twisting. My mind cataloged the information the same way it always had, cold, precise, unemotional. But somewhere beneath that, something waited. Not screaming, not shaking, waiting. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Voices. The low murmur of authority approaching. Police. I didn't turn around. I stood there, hands at my sides, watching my daughter breathe, absorbing every word, every number, every truth as it locked itself into place. Rage wasn't gone. It was deferred. And as the hospital moved around me, doctors, nurses, officers doing what they always did, I understood with absolute clarity that an irreversible line had been crossed. Chapter 3: The Sandwich. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. It was too quiet for a place holding that much pain. A television murmured in the corner, some daytime show with a laugh track that landed wrong against the walls. Plastic chairs lined up in rows, bolted to the floor like they expected people to run. Brooke sat hunched near the far wall, her face buried in her hands. Her shoulders shook in small, broken movements. She hadn't stopped crying since we left the ICU. I stood a few feet away, arms crossed, eyes fixed on nothing in particular when I saw him. Dominic. He was sitting near the vending machines, one leg crossed over the other, completely at ease. A crumpled brown paper bag rested on his knee. He pulled out a sandwich wrapped in wax paper and took a slow bite, chewing with exaggerated patience. He laughed at something on his phone. The sound cut through the room like a blade. For a second, I thought my mind was misfiring, that stress had stitched the wrong image into place. But then he looked up, met my eyes, and smiled. It wasn't nervous. It wasn't awkward. It was amused. I walked toward him without thinking. Each step felt measured, controlled, like my body knew exactly how far it could go without tipping over the edge. He watched me approach, still chewing. Crumbs fell onto his shirt. He didn't bother brushing them off. "Well," he said around the food, "there he is." Brooke looked up at the sound of his voice. Her face crumpled further when she saw him. "Dominic," she whispered. "How can you just sit there?" He shrugged. "What do you want me to do?" Panic. He took another bite. I stopped in front of him. Up close, I saw it. Dried blood along his knuckles. Not smeared. Not wiped clean. Thin, dark lines settled into the creases of his skin like they'd been there a while. My eyes lingered on them for half a second too long. He noticed. "Oh, this." He held up his hand, casually, turning it side to side. "Banged it on the door when I rushed her out. You know how it is." I didn't answer. He swallowed and leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms. "Man, hospitals always make everyone so dramatic." Brooke stood up, unsteady. "She's hurt," she said. "She's really hurt." Dominic rolled his eyes. "She fell." The words came out flat. "Practiced." "She fell," he repeated, louder this time, as if volume could make it true. "Kids fall, Brooke. You act like this is the first time." I felt something shift again, subtle, precise. My breathing slowed. My hearing sharpened. Training rising to the surface, not to fight, but to observe. "What happened?" I asked. He looked at me like I'd asked something stupid. "She tripped. Stairs. Boom. Drama. 9 fractures," I said. He snorted. "Doctors exaggerate. That's how they get paid." Brooke shook her head violently. "They said it wasn't Brooke," he cut in, standing now, towering over her just enough to remind her of the difference in size. "Relax. You're hysterical." I stepped between them. He glanced down at me, still smiling, eyes flicking over my face like he was assessing a tool, not a man. "You must be Mason," he said. "Heard a lot about you." I didn't offer my hand. He didn't seem to notice. "Sorry you had to rush over," he went on. "But hey, these things happen. Kids are clumsy." The laugh track from the television swelled behind him at the wrong moment. I looked at his hands again. "Did you touch her?" I asked. His smile tightened. "Of course I touched her. I picked her up after she fell." "What kind of question is that?" "Did you grab her legs?" Brooke gasped. Dominic's eyes flicked to her, then back to me. Something colder slid into his expression. "You accusing me of something?" "I'm asking," I said. He stepped closer, invading space deliberately. I didn't move. "You come in here acting all calm," he said quietly, "like you know something. But you weren't there." "I was." "That's what worries me," I replied. His jaw worked. For a brief moment, the mask slipped. Just a fraction. Enough. Then he laughed again, too loud, too sharp. "Jesus, man. You some kind of cop. No good." He grinned. "Because if you were, you'd know better." Brooke grabbed my arm. "Mason, please." "Not here." I felt her fingers digging into my sleeve, grounding me in the room in the moment. Dominic bent down, picked up his sandwich from the chair, and took another bite. He chewed slowly, eyes never leaving mine. "Relax," he said. She'll be fine. Kids bounce back. You should see the stuff I went through growing up. I said nothing. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, the same one with the blood on it, and shook his head. You people are unbelievable, acting like I did something. He leaned in close enough that only I could hear him. Accidents happen, he whispered. Don't make it weird. Then he stepped back, turned, and dropped back in his chair like nothing had happened. Brooke collapsed back in her seat, covering her face again. I stood there, staring at Dominic as he scrolled through his phone, laughing softly to himself, crumbs falling onto the floor at his feet. The contrast was unbearable. My wife breaking apart. My daughter unconscious behind glass. In him, comfortable, fed, entertained. Predators don't always snarl. Sometimes they eat sandwiches in hospital waiting rooms and laugh, while children scream down the hall. I didn't feel confusion anymore. I didn't feel doubt. I recognized him immediately for what he was. Chapter 4, Protected. The first patrol car arrived without urgency. No lights, no siren, just tires crunching over gravel outside the hospital entrance like they had all the time in the world. I watched through the glass as 2 officers stepped out, adjusting their belts, talking to each other about something that made one of them laugh. They walked in like this was a paperwork stop. One of the nurses pointed them toward the waiting room. Their eyes landed on Dominic immediately. His posture changed the moment he saw them. Not stiff, not defensive, comfortable, familiar. Hey, one of the officers said, smiling. Dominic stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. About time you guys showed up. They shook hands. Actually shook hands. Brooke looked up, confusion breaking through her grief. She stopped, like her brain refused to finish the thought. The taller officer glanced at me briefly, then back to Dominic. What happened? Dominic sighed theatrically. Kid took a tumble. Stairs. You know how it goes. The officer nodded. Yeah, kids. I stepped forward. That's not what the doctor said. The shorter officer finally looked at me. His expression flickered, mild annoyance, like I'd interrupted a conversation he didn't want to be having. And you are? He asked. Tess's father. Okay, he said, tone placating. Why don't you let us handle this? I want my statement taken, I replied. He exchanged a look with his partner. Sir, right now, we're just trying to get the basics. The basics, I repeated. My daughter has 9 fractures. Dominic chuckled. See? Dramatic. The taller officer raised a hand, palm out, to me. We spoke with hospital staff. They said she's stable. They said the injuries were consistent with twisting, I said. Deliberate force. Silence. Not surprise. Not alarm. Just silence. Then the shorter officer cleared his throat. Doctors speculate. That's what they do. Brooke stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly across the floor. They said it wasn't a fall, she cried. They said, Ma'am, the taller officer interrupted gently. I know you're upset. Upset. Dominic smiled at her like he was indulging a child. We've seen this before, the officer continued. Stressful situations. Parents get overwhelmed. Accidents happen. I looked at Dominic. He met my gaze without flinching. Accidents, he echoed softly. I felt the room tilt, not physically but morally, like gravity had shifted and everything solid had become unreliable. Are you arresting anyone? I asked. The shorter officer laughed. Actually laughed. Arrest? For what? For assault, I said. For abuse. He shook his head. There's no evidence of that. The medical report is not a criminal finding, he cut in. Not by itself. Dominic leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Told you. The taller officer clapped Dominic on the shoulder. You did the right thing bringing her in. Something inside me went very still. Brooke's voice dropped to a whisper. You're just letting this go? The officers exchanged another look. The unspoken kind. We're classifying this as a domestic accident pending further review, the taller one said. That means no charges at this time. At this time, Dominic repeated, amused. I stared at the badges on their chests. Names, numbers, symbols of authority that suddenly felt ornamental. You're not even separating witnesses? I asked. The shorter officer shrugged. No need. No need, I echoed. He gave me a tight smile. Look, man, I get it. Emotions are high, but you don't want to make this worse than it is. Worse for who? I asked. His smile faded slightly. For everyone. Dominic picked up his phone and started scrolling again, bored now that the performance was over. The officers took a few notes, slow, lazy scribbles, and then one of them checked his watch. "We'll be in touch if we need anything else," the taller officer said. They turned to leave. Just like that. As they walked past me, the shorter one leaned in and said quietly, "Best thing you can do is focus on your family." Then they were gone. The doors slid shut behind them, sealing the sound of their laughter on the way out. Brooke sank back in her chair like someone had cut her strings. Her face was pale now, eyes hollow. "They didn't listen," she said. "They didn't listen at all." I didn't answer. I was watching Dominic. He stretched, yawned, and tossed the empty sandwich wrapper into the trash. It missed the bin. He didn't bother picking it up. "See," he said lightly. "Told you to be fine." Brooke looked at him, something breaking open behind her eyes. "How can you say that?" He tilted his head. "Because it is." She shook her head slowly. "You scared her. You always scared her." Dominic's smile vanished. "Watch your mouth." I turned to Brooke. "What do you mean?" Her hands twisted together in her lap. He gets angry. Over nothing. He yells. He throws things. He's grabbed me before." Dominic's voice sharpened. "Enough." She flinched. I saw it clearly then. The reflex. The conditioning. "He told me not to tell anyone," she whispered. "Said no one would believe me anyway." Dominic laughed once, humorless. And look, I was right. I stepped closer to him. Not threatening. Just present. "You threatened my wife," I said calmly. He leaned in, eyes glittering. "You don't know anything about my family." "I know what I saw," I replied. "And I know what I heard." He shrugged. "Doesn't matter." And that was the truth of it. The police were gone. The report was filed. The story was decided. Domestic accident. No charges. No justice. I looked at Brooke, at the fear and guilt and exhaustion written into her face, and then back at Dominic, relaxed, untouched, protected. That was when I understood something fundamental. The system was not broken. It was working exactly as designed, and it would not touch this man. Chapter 5, The Silence is a Lie. Tessa woke in pieces. Not all at once, never all at once. Her eyes fluttered open, closed again, then opened halfway, like she wasn't sure the world was safe yet. The machines noticed before I did, their steady beeping, shifting pitch, calling a nurse quietly into the room. "Easy, sweetheart," the nurse said, soft as a blanket. "You're okay. You're in the hospital." I stood at the side of the bed, where she could see me, without turning her head. I didn't touch her legs. I didn't even let my eyes linger there. "Hey," I said. "It's Dad." Her gaze found mine. It locked on and didn't let go. Her lower lip trembled. "Daddy, I'm here." She swallowed. Her throat worked like it hurt to use it. "It still hurts." "I know," I said. "They're helping you. You're very brave." She shook her head weakly. "I wasn't brave." "That's okay," I replied. "You don't have to be." The nurse finished checking her and stepped back. "I'm going to give you a little privacy," she said, already halfway gone, like she understood something without being told. Brooke hovered near the door, arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but dry now. Spent. She looked at me, silently asking if she should stay. I nodded. She came closer, careful, like approaching a skittish animal. Tessa's eyes flicked to her mother, then back to me. She tightened her grip on my fingers. "Daddy," she whispered, barely louder than the machines. "I need to tell you something." I leaned in. "You can tell me anything." Her eyes darted to the door, then back again. "Is he here?" My chest tightened. "No," I said. "He's not here." She relaxed just a fraction. "Okay," she said. She took a breath that turned into a sob halfway through. I didn't fall. Brooke made a sound behind me. I didn't turn. "I know," I said gently. Tessa blinked, surprised. "You do?" "Yes." She swallowed again. "Uncle Dom, he got mad." "Mad about what?" I asked. "I spilled juice," she said. "On the floor." I said sorry. I cleaned it. But he was still mad. Her fingers clenched around mine, nails digging in. I didn't pull away. "What did he do?" I asked. She squeezed her eyes shut. "He grabbed me." "Where?" Brooke whispered, voice breaking. Tessa hesitated. "My legs." The word landed with a quiet finality. "He said I needed to learn," she continued. Her voice wavered, but didn't stop. He twisted them. It hurt. I screamed, and he laughed. Brooke collapsed into the chair beside the bed, one hand covering her mouth, the other reaching out to touch Tessa's hair. She couldn't speak. He told me not to tell, Tessa said. He said you'd be mad at me. He said no one would believe me. I felt something settle into place inside me. Not heat, not fury, certainty. You did the right thing, I said. You didn't do anything wrong. She opened her eyes and looked straight at me. You promise? I promise, I said. I meant it. She nodded slowly, like she was storing the words somewhere safe. Then the effort caught up with her. Her eyelids drooped. Daddy, she murmured. Yes. Will he come back? No, I said. Not loud. Not dramatic. True. She slept again, her grip loosening, fingers finally letting go. The room felt smaller after that. Brooke sat there, shoulders shaking silently, staring at the floor like it might open and swallow her. I should have known, she whispered. I should have listened to myself. I didn't correct her. This wasn't about blame. This was about truth. I stood there for a long moment, watching my daughter breathe, listening to the machines do their quiet work. I memorized the rhythm. The sound of life continuing. 9 fractures. Deliberate twisting. Laughter. The grieving part of me, the man who wanted to sit down, put his head in his hands, and let the weight crush him, stood up, nodded once, and stepped aside. There would be time later for grief. Right now, there was clarity. I didn't say anything else. No vows. No threats. No promises of what I would do. Those things don't belong in rooms like this. But inside, something old and disciplined slid into place. The part of me that cataloged, assessed, and planned without emotion. The father had been heard. Now the operator was awake. And the silence, every lie built on it, every protection it offered, was over. Chapter 6, Surveillance. I didn't rush anything. Rushing is what civilians do when emotions are loud. I let mine go quiet. Life settled into a new rhythm after the hospital, one measured in visiting hours, physical therapy schedules, and the soft beeping of machines that mark time better than clocks ever had. I learned how to help Tessa drink without moving her legs. I learned which jokes made her smile without hurting. I learned how to hold Brooke when she cried, without saying things that couldn't be taken back. And when the lights went out at night and the house finally slept, I rebuilt myself. Not with anger, with structure. I started with paper, old habits, a yellow legal pad, a pen that didn't smear. Names went at the top. Dominic's in the center, circled once. I didn't decorate it with words like monster or evil. Labels make you sloppy. Facts make you precise. I wrote down what I knew, where he lived, where he worked, who he spent time with. I left gaps where information was missing and didn't try to fill them too fast. Gaps tell you where to look next. During the day, I became invisible. I drove routes that blended into traffic, parked where no one noticed, sat with a coffee that went cold while I watched entrances and exits. I didn't stare. I reflected. Glass and chrome are useful if you know how to read them. Dominic liked routines. Most men like routines. They mistake them for control. He left his house at the same time most mornings, stopped at the same gas station, spoke to the same clerk who laughed too loud at his jokes. He worked odd hours for a man who called himself a contractor but never seemed to build anything anyone could point to. I listened more than I watched. Conversations leak when people think they're alone. Phone calls in parking lots. Complaints muttered to steering wheels. Arguments that ended too quickly when someone noticed a reflection where it shouldn't be. At night, I organized. Receipts, business cards, public records anyone could access if they knew what to ask for. I didn't break into anything. I didn't force doors. I let people open them themselves. The construction company was a shell. That much became clear early. A clean logo, a website that hadn't been updated in years, jobs listed that never quite lined up with permits or timelines. Money moved strangely around it. Inconsistent. Lumpy, like it didn't come from labor. Dominic liked to talk when he drank. He drank more than he thought. He liked to brag to men who wanted to be impressed. I let them talk. One name kept surfacing. A lawyer. The kind who smiled with his eyes and charged in favors instead of fees. He specialized in making problems smaller. Disappearances of paper. Adjustments of language. Accidents turned into misunderstandings. Another name followed him everywhere, one of the officers from the hospital. The shorter one. They met for coffee on Thursdays. Shook hands like equals. Laughed like old friends. Dirty doesn't always look dirty. Sometimes it looks pressed and polished and familiar. I noted dates, times, patterns. Brooke noticed a change in me, but didn't ask about it. She watched me the way you watch a river after a storm, aware something powerful was moving beneath the surface, trusting it to stay in its banks. "Are you sleeping?" she asked one night. "Enough," I said. It wasn't a lie. I slept when it was useful, ate when my body needed fuel. I trained again, not to fight, but to remember discipline. Early mornings, long walks, breathing drills that slowed my heart when it wanted to speed up. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is loud. It wants witnesses. It needs to be felt immediately. This was preparation. I learned Dominic's weak points without touching them. The debts he didn't like to talk about. The partner who resented him. The employee who knew too much and drank to forget it. I learned who he trusted and why he shouldn't. Some nights, I sat in the dark with a legal pad open on the table, pen hovering, not writing, just thinking, letting connections form on their own, letting inevitability do its work. People imagine planning as obsession. It isn't. It's patience. The more I learned, the smaller Dominic became. Not less dangerous, just more understandable. Predictable. A man propped up by favors and fear, convinced the world would keep bending out of his way because it always had. The system had taught him that. I didn't interfere with his life. Not yet. I didn't need to. Watching was enough. Because when you see a thing clearly, every angle, every support, every lie holding it upright, you don't need to rush the fall. You just need to know where to stand when it happens. And by the time I closed the notebook and turned off the light, one truth had settled into me completely, clean and unshakable. This wasn't about what I wanted to do to him. It was about what was going to happen. Chapter 7, Psychological Dismantling. The first crack was small. Dominic didn't even notice it at first. That was important. A flicker of lights in his house one evening. Nothing dramatic. Just a blink. Long enough to interrupt his television. Not long enough to feel intentional. He cursed, slapped the remote, and kept drinking. I watched from across the street, engine off, hands resting loosely on the wheel. I didn't smile. Patterns matter. So do doubts. The second outage came 2 nights later. Same time, same duration. This time, he stood up and checked the breaker box, muttering to himself. When the lights came back on, he stood there a moment longer than necessary, listening to the house like it might answer him. It didn't. The call came the next morning. His phone buzzed while he was at the gas station, coffee in one hand, receipt in the other. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. I couldn't hear what was said from where I sat, but I didn't need to. I practiced silence long enough to know its effect. He pulled the phone away from his ear, stared at it, then put it back slowly. "What?" he snapped. "Pause." His face tightened. "Who is this?" Pause. He hung up and stood there, staring at the screen like it might bite him. I drove away before he looked up. The calls continued. Never from the same number. Never saying the same thing twice. Sometimes it was nothing but breathing. Sometimes a single word. Sometimes just the sound of a child laughing, played too quietly to be sure it was real. Dominic stopped answering after a while. That was fine. He started sleeping with the lights on. I learned that from the neighbor, who complained loudly about the glare spilling into her yard. I nodded sympathetically and suggested a curtain. The evidence leaks were slower, more delicate. A form filed here, a question asked there. Things Dominic thought were buried surfacing just enough to be noticed. His construction work drew attention from people who liked paperwork and hated irregularities. He blamed his lawyer first, then his partners, then the cops he thought were friends. Paranoia thrives on uncertainty. One afternoon, he exploded in the parking lot outside a bar, screaming into his phone, face red, veins standing out in his neck. People watched. Someone filmed. Reputation is a fragile thing when it starts to crack. The x-rays came later. I waited for the right moment. Timing isn't about speed, it's about pressure. Dominic came home drunk one night, stumbling up the steps, keys jangling too loud in his hand. He froze when he saw the envelope on his kitchen table. Plain, white, no name. He didn't touch it for a full minute. Just stood there, breathing hard, eyes darting to the windows, the hallway, the dark corners of his own house. When he finally opened it, his hands shook. I knew exactly what he saw. Black and white images. Bones. Breaks. The unmistakable angles of damage no fall could explain. A child's legs mapped in pain and precision. At the bottom, a single line printed cleanly. You remember this. He vomited into the sink. After that, his world shrank. He stopped going out, stopped trusting anyone. He installed cameras, then repositioned them obsessively, convinced they weren't covering the right angles. He slept with a gun on the nightstand, then under the pillow, then in his hand. He jumped at shadows, at sounds, at nothing. Once, he burst out of his house at 3 in the morning, shouting into the darkness, gun raised, screaming for whoever was watching to show themselves. No one did. That was the point. I never appeared, never approached, never made myself visible. I was everywhere else. His phone rang at exactly the same minute every night for a week. When he answered on the 7th night, screaming, the voice on the other end said only one thing. She told the truth. He threw the phone across the room. Work dried up. Calls stopped coming. The men who used to slap his back avoided his eyes. The cops stopped returning his texts. Protection only lasts as long as it's convenient. He started drinking earlier. Harder. His hands shook even when he wasn't angry. I watched him age in weeks. One night, as rain hammered the roof of my truck, I watched him sit alone in his living room, lights blazing, television off, staring at the door. Waiting. For me. I didn't move. Predators fear one thing above all else, not punishment, not pain, not even death. They fear being seen. And Dominic knew, now that someone saw him, completely, clearly, without illusion. I let the pressure build. Let the silence work. Let his own mind do what no force ever could. By the time he started leaving his house armed, checking over his shoulder every 10 steps, muttering to himself about enemies he couldn't name, the dismantling was complete. I closed the notebook that night and placed it back in the drawer. He was ready, and I still hadn't touched him. Chapter 8, The Invitation. The message came at 2:17 a.m. No number, no name, just a string of text that sat on my phone like it had always been there. What do you want? I didn't answer right away. Desperation has a sound to it. You can hear it in the timing. In the fact that he'd finally broken his own rules. No calls, no texts, no reaching out. Men like Dominic believe silence is protection. When they speak first, it's because the silence has turned on them. I waited until morning. Routine matters. It tells people you're not reacting, you're deciding. At 8:04, I replied with 4 words. To end this. The phone rang immediately. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Yes, I said. There was breathing on the other end. Fast. Uneven. He tried to mask it with anger. You think this is funny? Dominic snapped. You think you're clever? I think you're tired, I replied. A pause. Then, quieter. What do you want from me? To talk. He laughed, sharp and brittle. You've got a funny way of starting conversations. You asked, I said. This is the answer. Another pause. Longer this time. Where? He finally said. I named the place without hesitation. An old industrial workshop on the edge of town. Condemned years ago. No cameras. No neighbors. No foot traffic. A building people passed every day without seeing. Silence stretched. You think I'm stupid? He asked. No, I said. I think you're scared. His breath caught. Just for a second. What if I don't show? He asked. Then it doesn't end, I replied. That did it. When? He asked. Tonight. He swallowed. I could hear it. You come alone. I will. Another lie he wanted to hear. Another truth he didn't need to know. The call ended without goodbye. I didn't move for a long time after that. Just sat at the table, phone face down, listening to the house breathe. Brooke and Tessa slept down the hall. Their breathing was steady now. Recovered. Not healed, but alive. I stood and went to the garage. The workshop bench was clean. I cleaned it the night before, though I hadn't known why yet. I opened the cabinet and took out the sledgehammer. Heavy. Simple. Honest. I checked the handle for cracks. There were none. I wrapped it in an old canvas tarp and set it by the door. No rush. I showered, put on clean clothes. Nothing that restricted movement. Nothing that drew attention. I looked at myself in the mirror afterward, not searching, not judging, just confirming. This wasn't a man going to vent rage. This was a man going to finish a process. The drive out was quiet. Streetlights thinned, then vanished. The road narrowed, then broke into patched asphalt and gravel. The workshop rose out of the darkness like a memory, corrugated metal, rusted doors, windows long since shattered and boarded over. I arrived early. Always arrive early. I parked 100 yards away and walked the rest, listening to the wind move through broken glass and weeds. The building smelled like oil and dust and abandonment. Perfect. I positioned myself where I could see the entrance without being seen. Time passed. I let it. Dominic's headlights appeared 10 minutes late. He slowed as he approached, scanning the area, engine idling like he might bolt. He parked crooked, doors locked, sitting there with the lights on for a long moment. I stayed still. Eventually, he got out. He looked smaller in the open space. Jacket zipped up to his chin, eyes darting, hand hovering near his waistband. "Hello," he called. His voice echoed wrong. Thin, unsteady. I stepped into view, not close, not far. Enough to be unmistakable. He jumped. "Jesus," he hissed. "You trying to get me killed?" "Lower your voice," I said. "No one's here." He laughed nervously. "Yeah? How would you know?" "I checked," I replied. He stared at me, trying to reconcile the calm with the months of fear. "You've been screwing with me," he said. "You think you're some kind of ghost. I think you know why I'm here." His jaw tightened. "I didn't do anything. I didn't argue." "That's it," he snapped. "You dragged me out here for nothing?" "To talk," I reminded him. He took a step closer, then stopped. "You want money?" "No." "An apology?" "No." "What then?" he demanded. I met his eyes. Held him. "The truth," I said. He scoffed. "You already made up your mind." "Yes." He looked around again, uneasy. "This place gives me the creeps." "That's honesty," I said. "You're getting better at it." He bristled. "You think you're in control here?" "I think this is where it ends," I replied. He swallowed hard. "You're not a cop." "No." "You're not recording this." "No." "What if I walk away?" he asked. I gestured toward the darkness behind him. "You can try." He didn't move. I stepped back toward the door and pushed it open. The hinges screamed in protest. Inside was black, cavernous, empty. "After you," I said. He hesitated, then entered, drawn by the need to finish it more than the instinct to survive. I followed, closing the door behind us. The sound echoed like a verdict. Inside, I reached down and pulled the canvas free. The sledgehammer rested in my hands, solid and final. Dominic stared at it, realization dawning too late. The air between us went still, and the truth, at last, had nowhere left to hide. Chapter 9, Consequence. The air inside the workshop was thick with dust and the metallic tang of rusted steel. The shadows pooled around the walls, swallowing corners, swallowing Dominic's bravado. I stepped closer, my boots silent on the concrete floor. The sledgehammer in my hands was heavy, deliberate. Not a weapon for rage, it was a tool for balance. Dominic raised his hands instinctively, then lowered them, trying to mask fear with defiance. Okay, he said, voice tight. "What's this about? Just, let's talk, all right?" I'll apologize, No apologies," I said. Voice low, calm, controlled. "You've already had every chance. You had her. You hurt her. You lied to everyone. You laughed at it." His eyes flicked to the sledgehammer. What are you doing?" I ignored the panic threading through his voice. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't hysterical. It was appropriate. Perfect. "Do you understand what you did?" I asked, crouching slightly to match his height. His knees trembled. "I want to hear it from you." I don't know what you mean." His voice cracked. He took a step back. "It was an accident. She fell. I swear." "No," I shook my head slowly. "Not an accident. 9 fractures. Spiral breaks. Twisted. You know it's true. You try to make yourself small, but facts aren't negotiable." He swallowed hard, shaking his head. I didn't mean you did," I said. I moved closer. He stumbled back until the wall met his shoulders. I could see it in his eyes now, the full, unshielded fear. The predator stripped bare, caught in the light of consequence. I, I was just disciplining her, he stammered. She needed to learn. I didn't want— You're a liar, I said quietly. You never cared about her. You only cared that no one saw. You enjoyed the fear, the power. You broke a child, and you laughed. The realization hit him fully now. His lips parted. He made a sound somewhere between a whine and a gasp. Please. I'll do anything. I'll leave. I didn't flinch, didn't move. Just stepped closer, sledgehammer ready, hands steady. He flinched away, but the wall trapped him. I placed my hand lightly on his chest to keep him upright. No violence. Not yet. Control, not chaos. You don't get a bargain, I said. This isn't rage. This isn't revenge. This is balance. This is cause and effect. You broke her. Now you feel the weight of it precisely as it should be felt. He tried to twist, to shrink, to minimize the truth. It wasn't that bad. She'll be fine. She'll walk. I didn't mean it. You lied to everyone. You scared her into silence. You thought you were untouchable. You weren't. You never were. He crumpled against the wall. Tears glistened at the corners of his eyes. Please. I'll do anything. Anything. Just don't. I shook my head. I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to make you stop. Permanently. Understand the damage you caused. No one else could, but I can. The sledgehammer hovered for a moment. Silent. Heavy. I moved with the precision of someone who has done this in practice, in imagination, in calculation. Every angle, every impact planned. He tried to speak again, begged, reasoned, whined, but the words were meaningless. The truth had overtaken his defenses. He realized that pleading, spinning, pretending, minimizing it didn't matter. I swung once. Slow. Controlled. The sound of the metal striking bone echoed in the empty building like a bell. He gasped, screamed, but not for long. His body jerked once, reflexive. The sound of his spine giving way was clinical, precise. Another swing, then another. Not chaotic, not frenzied, calculated, deliberate. His cries shrank, became shallow gasps, until there was only silence. I stepped back. The sledgehammer thudded against the concrete floor. Dust rose in small clouds. He lay there, paralyzed, alive, but broken. The symmetry of it, his cruelty mirrored in his own body, was exact. I pulled out my phone. One call. Medical. There's been an accident, I said evenly. Man, male, 35. Conscious but immobilized. Spine injury. Need ambulance immediately. No names. No explanations. Just facts. When I hung up, I looked at him again. The light in his eyes was gone. The defiance. The lies. The arrogance. All replaced by a silent, undeniable recognition of what had been done. I didn't speak. Didn't taunt. Didn't savor. The work had been done. The balance restored. I wrapped the sledgehammer in the canvas. Tucked it back in my truck. Every motion calm. Every movement methodical. Outside, the night was still. Empty. The kind of quiet that waits for dawn without judgment. I walked my truck. Engine started. Lights cut through the darkness. No sound of sirens yet, but they would come. I didn't wait. There was no need. Dominic remained in the workshop, facing the consequences of his choices. Alive. Unable to harm anyone ever again. And that was enough. I drove away. Silent. Calculated. The weight of what had been done settled around me. Neither heavy nor light, just absolute. Justice was served in the only way it could be. Permanent, precise, and measured. Back at home, Brooke and Tessa would sleep, unaware of the meticulous execution, but I knew. And somewhere inside, the truth rang clear. No one else could have done it. No system. No authority. Only the consequences delivered exactly where they belonged. I left the workshop as quietly as I had entered. Dominic would survive, but he would never rise again. The police would arrive. They would assess. They would file reports. They would not understand. I didn't look back. And that was the end. Chapter 10, Finality. The morning arrived like a quiet verdict. The ambulance siren had faded hours ago, leaving only the faint echo of a disaster contained. Dominic had been taken to the hospital. No one questioned the story I'd told. Robbery gone wrong. That's what the officers wrote in their report. That's what they would repeat if anyone asked. Convenient, believable, detached. Perfect. I didn't need to see him. I didn't need confirmation. The knowledge of what had been done was enough. He was alive, but confined to a body that could no longer betray anyone. That was enough. I drove through the city slowly, passing the familiar streets of my neighborhood. Shops opening, mailboxes clattering, the ordinary hum of life continuing as if nothing had ever changed. Ordinary. Ordinary wasn't enough for the world outside this small bubble of truth. At home, the house smelled faintly of morning. The coffee machine ticked and hissed. Tessa's small bedroom door was closed. I paused at the threshold, listening. She slept. Peacefully. Truly peacefully, if peace could be measured in shallow breaths and soft eyelids. Brooke stirred in the kitchen, moving quietly, careful not to disturb the fragile calm. She looked up when I entered. "How's she doing?" she asked. "Sleeping," I said. Her eyes lingered on mine, searching, hesitant. "And you?" I shrugged. "I'm here. Not more. Not less. Enough." I walked down the hall, pausing outside Tessa's door. Her small chest rose and fell in rhythm with the machines and the faint morning light spilling through the blinds. A soft, steady rise and fall that seemed impossible after the chaos of the last few days. I opened the door slowly, stepping inside. "Daddy." Her voice was small, tired but curious. She turned on her side, propping her head on a pillow, eyes opening just enough to see me. "Hey," I said, voice quiet. "Morning." She yawned, stretched, then smiled faintly. "You scare the monster away." I crouched beside her bed, letting the words sink in without interruption. She wasn't referencing the truth of what had happened in detail. She didn't need to. In her mind, the monster was gone, safe in a child's way. "You did, huh?" I asked, keeping my tone gentle, almost teasing. She nodded. "Yeah, you scared him away. He won't come back." The weight of the words pressed down. Not relief, not joy, not satisfaction. Just weight. The kind that sits in your chest and refuses to leave. I smiled faintly. "Good." She nestled back into the covers, closing her eyes again. Sleep reclaimed her. I stayed for a moment, watching the rise and fall of her chest, memorizing the fragile rhythm. Outside the room, Brooke finally spoke. You did what you had to do." Her voice was quiet, tentative. "I thank you." I didn't respond immediately. Words weren't necessary. There was nothing to thank me for. Justice had been done. The scales balanced. Nothing more could be added. Nothing could be undone. I left them for a moment and walked to the garage. The truck was there, untouched since the night before. Inside, the canvas still covered the sledgehammer. I didn't touch it. Not now. Not ever again. It was a tool of balance, not vengeance. It had served its purpose. The phone buzzed with a text notification. News from an officer, casual, unaware. Robbery gone wrong. No suspects identified. I read it and placed the phone back in the drawer. They would never know. They didn't need to. Justice had its own language. Mine didn't need witnesses. Back inside, I leaned against the wall of the living room, watching light spill over the furniture. The quiet of the house wasn't relief. It wasn't healing. It was the aftermath. The weight of action. The burden of knowing you delivered certainty where chaos had thrived. Brooke approached, hesitant again. "Will it ever feel lighter?" I shook my head slowly. "No," she frowned. "Never. Never like you think." I looked toward Tessa's room. "The weight doesn't leave. You carry it differently. Quietly. Carefully. It stays with you, but it doesn't crush you if you respect it." She nodded, unsure. "So, you're okay?" "I'm functional," I said. "Calm. Detached. Enough." We stayed in silence for a moment. No words could improve upon the stillness. No explanations could change the reality that had been set. Later, I walked past the front window and noticed the street. Life continued. Mailmen, joggers, a dog barking in the distance. The ordinary, mundane rhythm of a world unaware that a predator had been removed, that a threat had been neutralized, and that a small girl could now sleep without fear. I could have walked away, could have tried to blend into the world outside, like any man might after such an act. But I didn't. I never would. The clarity of purpose didn't fade. The knowledge of what had to be done was a permanent fixture, as indelible as the scars left on Tessa's legs. I returned to her room. She murmured something in her sleep. "Daddy, I'm here," I whispered, kneeling beside her bed once more. Her hand reached for mine instinctively. I held it, not moving, not speaking, not over-explaining. The simplicity of presence was enough. She closed her eyes again, peaceful. Real peace, fragile, tentative but real. I stayed until the sunlight shifted across her face, warm and impartial. Justice had been delivered, precise and unyielding. And yet, this wasn't relief. It wasn't closure. I left her room slowly and moved to the kitchen. Brewed coffee. Sat alone at the table. The weight settled across my shoulders, heavy and uncompromising. I drank in silence, feeling the gravity of what had been done. The predator could no longer harm anyone. The system would never touch him. The law never had to. I had ensured balance myself, and the consequences had been exact. Outside, the world continued unaware. Police would file their reports. Dominic would be treated as a victim of circumstance. No one would know. No one could understand. And that was exactly how it should be. I sipped my coffee and looked toward the living room. Brooke moved quietly, checking on Tessa once more, then retreating. The house hummed with life again, but it was a life that carried the shadow of truth silently. The truth was never light. It was weight, and I would carry it alone. I drained the cup, set it down, and let the quiet settle around me like a shroud. For Tessa, it was peace. For Dominic, it was finality. For me, it was everything. And I knew, with the clarity that had guided every step of this path, that this weight would stay with me. Always. Silent, heavy, uncompromising. The chapter of action was closed. Only life remained, measured, steady, and burdened with the knowledge of what had been done. I didn't need to look back. I had delivered balance. The rest of the world would carry on. I would carry the weight. And that was enough.